How's it going, everyone? Patch 10.2 has been out for a bit now, and we of course need to revisit the Enhancement Shaman builds and rotations because they have slightly changed. This video is going to focus entirely on the Elementalist single target setup, but be on the lookout for future videos talking about the Elementalist multi-target build as well. If you've been a fan of the Elementalist build so far in Dragonflight, then you are in luck because this build is performing quite well, and it's even beating out the Storm single target build in damage. We will go over the talents, rotation, and a scenario for this, but first a quick review of our current tier set bonus. The 2-set bonus is going to cause Primordial Wave to summon a Lightning Feral Spirit whenever it's cast, and this is going to last for 15 seconds and give us a 20% boost to our nature damage, benefiting Lightning Bolt, Chain Lightning, and Elemental Blast. The 4-set bonus will cause our Feral Spirits to reduce the cooldown of Primordial Wave by 7 seconds for each wolf summoned. Overall, I'm pretty thrilled with this tier set, but it does mean that we have to lock into using the Primordial Wave talent, and if you've been playing Enhancement through Dragonflight so far, then on the Elementalist build you've probably been used to using this already, but unfortunately if you're someone that has not been using this, you'll have to get used to it, or if you're not a fan of Primordial Wave, then this just might not be the patch for you. Looking at the talents here, things should look pretty familiar to you if you've been playing Enhancement so far in Dragonflight. The right hand side of the tree is going to be key for this build because we want Hot Hand and the other Lava Lash related talents because that's where a big chunk of our damage is going to be coming from. Towards the center of the tree, you'll see that Elemental Blast has moved up on the tree and Wind Fury Totem and Sundering have both moved around a little bit. Elemental Blast is another must-have talent because it is going to be our main Maelstrom weapon stack spender. With this moving up on the tree, we are also no longer required to take a point in Storm's Wrath, which saves us a talent point to use elsewhere. For a single target build like this, we should be taking Wind Fury Totem because it is our main raid utility. However, unlike the previous patches, we are now dropping a point from Sundering and no longer taking that. With that said, we now have 2 extra points to spend in our talent tree, and those are going down to Elemental Assault. This talent was updated in 10.2 to also give Lava Lash and Ice Strike a 50% chance to generate a Maelstrom weapon stack per point. So if we put both of our points in here, then we get guaranteed stack generation from these 2 spells, as well as Storm Strike. And the final thing to highlight in the talents is the bottom left path where we do need to pick up Primordial Wave and then go all the way down to Splintered Elements. That's a very high level overview of our talents. I'll leave the import string in the description, and if you have any questions on why we're taking specific talents, then leave a comment below. Now let's get into the actual rotation here. Once again, if you've been playing Enhancement throughout Dragonflight, then this isn't going to look too different than what we've seen in previous patches. Starting at the top, our cooldowns are always going to be our highest priorities, starting with Primordial Wave and then Feral Spirits. We pretty much always want to be using these on cooldown because they are both already on a short cooldown, plus with our tier set, Primordial Wave gets cooldown reduction every time we summon a Feral Spirit, and Feral Spirit gets cooldown reduction every time we gain a Maelstrom weapon stack, so they are both up very frequently. Moving down to number 3 on the list, if you're new to Enhancement, I would probably skip past this, but I did want to call it out because if you ever do find yourself with 4 or more Feral Spirits active at a time, you do want to just immediately cast off an Elemental Blast if you have 5 or more Maelstrom weapon stacks. Usually, if this does happen, it's going to be during a lust window, so it's not something you'll be dealing with frequently, and the reason why this is prioritized is because every Feral Spirit active is going to increase the damage of Elemental Blast by 20%, and because damage modifiers are multiplicative, having 4 Feral Spirits active is actually giving Elemental Blast around a 107% damage increase, which is pretty insane considering Elemental Blast damage is already super high on its own, and that's not even accounting for the bonus damage from the Maelstrom weapon stacks. Anyways, moving along, we then need to focus on using Lava Lash during Hot Hand windows. These Hot Hand procs make Lava Lash do more damage, and it reduces the cooldown of Lava Lash, so you need to remember during these Hot Hand windows, you should be weaving in a Lava Lash every other GCD. And this gets us to the spender section of our rotation where we are trying to spend those Maelstrom weapon stacks as frequently as possible so we don't overcap on them. Anytime we're over 5 stacks and Elemental Blast has 2 charges available, that is going to be our first priority so that we are using our charges as effectively as possible and not missing out on any casts of Elemental Blast. After that, if we are at 8 Maelstrom stacks and Primordial Wave buff is active, then you do want to cast a Lightning Bolt so the buff isn't wasted. As a side note here, if you are doing your opener, keep in mind that even though Primordial Wave is giving you 10 Maelstrom weapon stacks, because you start the fight with 2 charges of Elemental Blast, you will use those initial stacks on a Elemental Blast cast And then before the Primordial Wave buff goes away, you should build back up to at least 8 stacks to use on a lightning bolt. Next at priority number 7 is once again Elemental Blast if we are at least 8 stacks and 2 Feral Spirits are active. As I said earlier, every Feral Spirit active is giving Elemental Blast more damage, so we really want to save these for when those Feral Spirits are up. And then if we are at 8 stacks but no Feral Spirits are up, or Elemental Blast doesn't have any charges, then we can look at casting Lightning Bolt. Now, you're probably wondering, why are we spending at 8 Maelstrom weapon stacks rather than say 5 or 10 or any other number? And the short answer is, if you run sims and prioritize spending at anywhere from 5 to 10 stacks, then you get this nice little bell curve where prioritizing spending at 8 stacks ends up being the most overall damage. Why is this though? Well, what it comes down to is if you're spending earlier at say 5, 6, or 7 stacks, each cast of your spender is doing less damage than if you had waited, and this could be delaying using other abilities that could potentially be doing more damage, like say a Lava Lash with 3 or more Ashen Catalyst stacks. Spending earlier also means that we are wasting more Hailstorm stacks and potentially not even utilizing our Ice Strike buff. On the other side of the spectrum, if you're waiting to spend at 9 or 10 stacks, you're missing out on damage because you'll end up being overcapped on stacks more often and just wasting those additional Maelstrom weapon stacks. Moving past the spender section of the rotation, we get to Ice Strike followed by Lava Lash. Ice Strike we prioritize a little bit more to get it on cooldown and maximize its usage. Plus, don't forget, each of these spells will give us a guaranteed Maelstrom weapon stack on use. Then at priority 11, we have Frost Shock when we have those Hailstorm stacks available, which leads us into Storm Strike, which, like Lava Lash and Ice Strike, gives us guaranteed Maelstrom stack generation. Finally, if all else fails and we do have at least 5 stacks available, we can look to spend those on a Lightning Bolt. Otherwise, we just need to fill our downtime with Frost Shock and Flame Shock. And that does it for our priority list. Let's see what this looks like in a scenario. For the scenario, we can assume that we have one target that Flame Shock is already active on. We currently have 2 Feral Spirits active, and both Primordial Wave and Feral Spirit are on cooldown. We are in a hot hand window, and we do have 5 Maelstrom weapon stacks. However, we have no Hailstorm stacks, and finally, we have 1 charge of Elemental Blast available. With all that in mind, the first ability we want to use here is going to be Lava Lash. We are in that hot hand window, and because of that, we already know that we are going to look to use Lava Lash pretty much every other GCD here. Because we still don't have a Maelstrom stacks, we next have to look down to using Ice Strike, and that again leads us into another Lava Lash because of the hot hand window. At this point, we've used 2 Lava Lashes and 1 Ice Strike, which have each generated us a Maelstrom stack, and this now puts us at 8 Maelstrom stacks, so we can look to use an Elemental Blast here. Keep in mind that in game you'll also be getting Maelstrom stacks every 3 seconds from wolves being active and randomly off of auto attacks as well, so it's possible you could be at 9 or 10 stacks at this point, but for the sake of this scenario, we'll keep it simple and only account for stack generation on the abilities we use. We can then use another Lava Lash here, and next, because Ice Strike will still be on cooldown from using it earlier, we can look to use Frost Shock because we did gain Hailstorm stacks when we casted Elemental Blast. This then leads us into a final Lava Lash, and with us not being back to 8 Maelstrom stacks, and with Ice Strike, Lava Lash, and Frost Shock all being on cooldown, we'll want to cast a Storm Strike here to finish off this scenario. And that's going to pretty much wrap up everything for this video. As a final note, if you're wondering when exactly you should run this build, this is definitely a raid focused build only. You should definitely not be running this outside of raid at all. But when it comes to a Mirdrasil, you can run this on pretty much every single boss. The raid is very single target focused, and so this build is by far the most popular build for every single boss in the raid currently. If you have any questions, definitely leave a comment below and I'll try to get to them as quickly as possible. Hopefully you enjoyed the video and have a nice day.